This KFAN podcast is sponsored by Builders and Remodelers, exclusive Twin Cities provider of Elements Windows. Get the highest quality windows at unmatchable value. Visit buildersandremodelers.com for more details.
Did I read that the next Josh Allen had a rough afternoon at TCO?
Sounds like he threw at least one pick.
Yeah, but it was windy.
It was windy.
It
was a windy day today.
The tweet you sent me suggested it was windy. Don't you have to be able to throw in wind?
Well, let's take a look. Chicago, yes.
It's the Windy City, isn't it?
At the Steelers, yes.
Yes.
At the Browns,
Ooh.
yes.
On the lake.
At the Chargers, yes.
Yeah.
Green Bay.
Does it get windy in Sandy? Oh, they're in L.A. now. Does it get windy in L.A.? Yeah, I guess it can.
It could.
Yeah.
At Green Bay,
Whoa.
conditions.
Yeah.
At Seattle, the noise that the 12s give you. At the New York Giants, they're outside. You got to throw outside. Not every game is going to be indoors at the People's Stadium.
It might be too easy to give up, a little early to give up on him, though. It's June 2nd.
I'd let him come back. Yeah.
But that's where we are, man. He is going to be, every single pass is going to be analyzed from now until, well, his career ends in 15 years. Will he finish his career as a member of the Minnesota Vikings, J.J. McCarthy?
No.
Probably not. But that doesn't mean he can't have a wonderful career while he's here.
The question is over under 2.5 Lombardi trophies. What are you taking?
Wow.
Over or under? Given what we've learned.
Well, what we've learned. Yeah, Josh Allen.
12 years of JJ. So to 37. Think I did that math right? Probably not.
Very well done.
How many Lombardis in that 12 years?
I'm going to go under. I'm going to go under.
You're going to take the under?
Yeah, I think that's
awful
safe.
Negative.
Well, but 2.5 is pretty high.
Not with what I'm reading.
Well, yeah, you're right.
Although Josh Allen doesn't have one either. No.
Yeah, but
Aaron Rodgers only got one.
Aaron Rodgers only got one.
I know.
It's hard to get him, man.
It is true.
It's really hard. You know what we were talking about yesterday? The marathon that is a run to the Stanley Cup and to the NBA Finals trophy.
It's ridiculous.
It's 16 victories. You realize between our two teams, the closest either of our two teams have gotten, and it was only once, was 10 victories. Just past halfway, right? The Wolves won 2 with Garnett.
They did.
It was a 4-2 loss.
Yeah.
The Wild have never won more than 8 of the 16. And it is a reminder of how worthy I think any team is that wins it. That's hard. 16 postseason victories it takes. Does it not? Isn't that right? Do I have the number right?
Yes, 4-4-4-4.
The closest we haven't gotten even close. Hockey, we're halfway there. And in basketball, we got to 10, needing 6 more once. Correct? Last 2 years, how many wins did we get for the Wolves in the postseason?
Would have been 9.
9.
Yeah.
That's it. You need 16. Doesn't it tell you, though, what a meat grinder it is? How hard it is to get all the way? Let me get to a couple texts regarding the transgender competition or participation issue that's reared its head locally now via softball. Dan, the biggest point I believe you made is simply this: we cannot have an adult conversation. While in this case you're talking about one subject, the truth is the two sides cannot have adult conversation on many issues. Boys and girls sports, immigration, etc. We're headed for a train wreck, I'm afraid. Those of us in the middle can only sit and watch because either side wants to have a conversation. Love the Grum Gal writes, I am part of the LGBTQ community. It is not fair. I ran track, and I would be so upset about this. Gentlemen, this is an interesting topic, but you seem to be standing in the middle of the fence because it's clearly wrong for transgender to play sports. That's just the facts. Have a good day. Dan, a biological male who identifies as female and plays in or against or with females being allowed to disregard true female athletes. Let's fast forward and just say all female sports are being played only by those who were born as males. There's no way that's okay. So why should we be allowing one to be okay? Far left Nokomis guy checking in, who he says, coach a non-athletic high school extracurricular whose team had 2 trans competitors. Balancing fairness versus ethics/morals has always seemed impossible, but I agree that there is a fairness issue that is really hard to admit out loud to. especially for me as someone who doesn't care about the fairness as much as access to the competitive environment itself. I want to say that I appreciate your nuance on the issue. Fairness is not anti-trans, but not ensuring access is, and that's what's so hard about this. He's distilled it, I think, perfectly.
That's kind of what I was struggling to say earlier.
That's the now. But sooner or later, you have to. I think that doesn't preclude you trying to make a call on it, though. And then does it get to the numbers of how many individuals are you being unfair to, compared to how many individuals who are transgender are trying to participate? The right is obsessed with transgender individuals, and it's disgusting. Many right-wing individuals will use transgender speculation as an excuse for someone who is not transgender is better than his or her daughter. Some right-wing morons even speculate that Caitlin Clark is transgender. These are the people that lefties feel so obligated to defend. I want to also read. Those are all interesting. I appreciate the. There's a number of others. I'm going to try to cull through the list. There's a bunch. So here's when the lawsuit was filed on behalf of some students in the state of Minnesota, correct?
Yep.
Athletes. This was the Ellison statement to the Star Tribune. Ellison said he will, quote, continue to defend the rights of all students to play sports with their friends and peers. In addition to getting exercise and the fun of competition, playing sports comes with so many benefits for young people. You build friendships that can last a lifetime. You learn how to work as part of a team, and you get to feel like you belong. I believe it's wrong to single out one group of students who already face high levels of bullying and harassment and tell these kids they cannot be on the team because of who they are. Now that completely, it sounds good.
That's not what's being disputed.
It isn't.
Yeah.
You're sidestepping the issue. And there was a time when folks in the same political category that Keith Ellison is in we're standing quite tall for fairness for women to compete, to have an opportunity to compete amongst themselves. That this country had historically had harassed them, had discriminated against them. And that's the sad part to me, is it's almost completely forgotten in the current context. And this is, again, where it's because there are competing legitimate interests here that can be discussed. But when Keith Ellison's answer is that answer, you've rigged it. You're telling me then you're really not trying to have an honest discussion about the issues that are raised regarding these particular fairness issues. Because I, based on all the reading I've done, believe there is an advantage most of the time for transgender athletes who are participating in women's events to participate in those events. I just think we could try to talk ourselves out. Well, some sports, maybe not so much. But I don't even trust those kinds of comebacks because I think they're more politically motivated than anything else. Now, you go back to what Texter Guy said, and you go, well, the reason I'm reflexive about this is the reasons he laid out, because I want everybody to have an opportunity. But if you are, in a sense, I mean, I would also say to Attorney General Ellison, we keep score. If we were in sports and no scores are kept, we're just all having fun and competing, and there's no trophies, there's no nothing, then I might be able to live with his non-answer. But that's not what the way we do it in athletic competition at the high school level, right? College level.
Right.
Do we do it that way? No, we don't do it that way. We do it as we're keeping score. People get invested in that. Sometimes, as we talked about, parents are out of control and they get too invested in that. And some of them, I'm sure, on this subject will be invested for the wrong reason, like, well, we really wanted to win, and now it's easy to rip because we identified the individual who prevented my daughter from winning is transgender. Middle of our first quarter hour pause right here. A couple more texts on this controversy. I do want to get to a couple things before Johnny Athletic joins. So a couple other things before Johnny Athletic joins at 4.
Head over to our contest page, KFAN.com. It's your chance to enter to win a 2-night stay at Breezy Point Resort for 4, including golf, and it's all thanks to Custom One. KFAN.com, keyword contest to enter.
When we imagine graduation day or graduation night, we think good thoughts, do we not? We think culmination, a celebration, saluting maybe your daughter, maybe your son, maybe your brother, maybe your sister, nephew, whatever the case may be. We say, job well done. It's a rite of passage. It can be sometimes daunting for people. There's some people who don't want big celebrations. It's like, oh, God, it's just sort of the how regimented it might be. But I think overall, it's an event that you associate a lot of good feelings. The last thing you want to associate with your graduation ceremony is gunplay. We all decide, I guess, again, what we get outraged over and what we don't. And I guess I'm surprised and a little sad that we're not a little bit more outraged about this particular story. 20-year-old man charged Monday on allegations that that's today, that he opened fire with a rapid-fire handgun and shot two people outside the University of Minnesota's Mariucci Arena, where Wayzata High School's graduation just concluded. Hamza Abdirashid Saeed of Coon Rapids was charged in Hennepin County District Court with first and second degree assault and illegal gun possession in connection with the shooting about 8 p.m. Saturday. Saeed remained jailed in lieu of $300,000 bail ahead of a court appearance tomorrow afternoon. While Monday's charges did not point to a motive other than there being several males arguing shortly before the gunfire, Wayzata School Superintendent Chase B. Anderson said in a statement Sunday to district families and staff, quote, "At this point, we have not been able to confirm any connection between the shooter or the second victim, a young man, and our graduation ceremony." Criminal complaint pointed out that police investigators have yet to determine whether Saeed was inside the graduation ceremony prior to the shooting. Charges said a man described by U Police as 49 years old was shot in the head while outside in the arena with family members. Second victim, 19 years old, was shot in the leg. Officials have said both victims were expected to survive their wounds. According to the complaint, the Glock 17, a 9mm handgun used by Saeed, was illegally modified with a switch, a device that allows the weapon to fire multiple shots with a single pull of the trigger. Campus police raced to the arena after witnesses reported hearing at least two gunshots. Older victim with a gunshot wound to the head, bleeding heavily. Even so, the man was able to say he was standing outside with his family after the graduation ceremony and observed a group of males fighting or having an argument behind him. Officers tracked down the younger victim, said he was shot in the right thigh. While receiving emergency medical attention from the officers, he was not cooperative with their effort to find out more about the shooting. Disgusting. Should be more outrage about this story than there is. I know part of it is, well, what do you do with it? It's not going out on much of a limb to be against this kind of nonsense, but I fear sometimes we just sort of, oh yeah, okay, well, where was that? Oh, okay, yeah. Stuff happens to you sometimes. It's just sort of kind of the deal. That should never be that reaction, should it? It should never be accepted. And it becomes even worse, like I said, when it's a happy event. But, you could say any event at Mariucci Arena is going to be a happy event. But you think, again, Greg, it's not on your wavelength, right? You're just not thinking about that.
That's not what you're thinking about.
You just left the ceremony, maybe a good speech or two, whatever the case may be. You're feeling good about your kid. You got to dodge bullets. Then the other story.
Well, you know what the most important part of this story is, though?
What's that?
To your point? What happens next to the perpetrator?
Great point.
That's what I think. I know he's been charged.
The bail number was impressive to me.
Yeah.
$300,000 bail as a start, but you're right.
That's with a lot of these recently, shootings, Tesla guy, whatever it is.
Yeah.
What happens next?
No question.
To
and we will be watching.
Type of message there.
We will be watching as the hardcore left-wingers that we are. How about Mississippi, the Boom Island Park story? Again, Star Tribune, I'm quoting from there. A woman was killed, 5 men were wounded by gunfire in a nighttime shooting at a popular Mississippi River park near downtown Minneapolis. Police caution tape was strung up around Boom Island Park early Monday. Evidence markers dotted the scene of the city's second mass shooting in recent weeks. One of the men shot was in critical condition. A woman was also treated for minor injuries inflicted during the mayhem. Here's the quote from Minneapolis Police Chief Brian O'Hara, who, of course, has gotten himself in trouble recently for speaking too much of the truth. It's more akin to a war zone with the amount of shell casings that the officers are recovering here. It's more akin to a war zone with the amount of shell casings that the officers are recovering here. The woman who was fatally shot in a vehicle, was in a vehicle at the time, then taken to HCMC where she died, according to police. Now, at the time this story was written, there had been no arrest. There may be an update on that. Victims are cooperating. The investigation. At least 100 people were still in the park when officers arrived. So, do we know any more? Was it an argument that broke out? Do we have any new information regarding what might have led to this nonsense? Nonsense is, again, too light a term for it. This grotesque situation. Here's a quote from the mayor via social media, calling it completely unacceptable. That's courageous. That's going out on a limb. This week, we're launching Operation Safe Summer, a coordinated effort with law enforcement partners at every level to prevent violence and keep people safe. We're going to keep working with our partners to keep incidents like this rare. Apparently, there was a gathering, maybe a barbecue, the chief said. There was more than one shooter here at the scene. Chief said the gunfire had left literally hundreds of pieces of evidence for investigators to assess. Now, I know a lot of the violence numbers are encouraging, going down, right? In certain parameters are down. But it's the beginning of summer, right? This is early June now. It shouldn't leave a good taste in pretty much anybody's mouth. 2022, I forgot this. 7 people were shot on Boom Island. Do you remember that?
Yes, vaguely.
So Boom Island, is it just because the numbers of people who assemble? Why is it
probably
vulnerable to this?
Yeah, a public space.
Boom Island, unfortunately named in this particular case, a pathetic story as well. On that happy note, let's get back to the toy department where it's relatively safe. But I hope those stories don't get forgotten. As you say, let's also see what approach not just law enforcement takes, but the Hennepin County Attorney's Office takes as well. We do know this. John Athletic attended the Tim Conley debriefing earlier today. He is the president of basketball operations for the Wolves. Did we get a clue or two that Tim Conley is here to stay? Did we get a clue or two on whether the core of this team is here to stay, or there might be another major trade this offseason involving the Wolves? All those questions, we hope, will be answered now.
We're either going to win or lose with Ant. It doesn't mean we're not always trying to look for complementary skill sets that can help him reach his, what we think he can be. But we're either going to win a championship or not get there on the backs of Anthony. And the greatest thing is he embraces that responsibility. He's such a positive teammate. Obviously, supremely talented, but I think there's nobody in the league that we could choose that is more ready for that level of responsibility.
Tim Conley earlier today chatting, of course, about his foundational player, Anthony Edwards. Johnny Athletic was there. He's brought to us by RBC Wealth Management. Let me start with this toss-up. Is Tim Conley staying?
I think he is, Dan. I asked him that was my second question out of the gates this afternoon at his press conference, and he just said that, yeah, I think you guys are stuck with me. So we know that his contract is up, that he can be a free agent. And we'd also know that there were several teams that were kind of poking around, seeing if there might be an avenue for him to for them to kind of lure him away the same way that the Wolves lured him away from the Denver Nuggets. But he was pretty straightforward in answering that he and his family like it here. They like the community here. They like what they're building here. And he said, yeah, you guys are stuck with me. So he's going to be here going forward. We'll see if we can get some details on the, terms and things of any kind of agreement that eventually gets done here. But he was pretty emphatic in just saying that he's not going anywhere.
He also
expect him to be here for a while.
I think he also said during that quote, elicited by your question, that feels like home here. That was the other part of it that noted. He had pretty much told us the same thing last time we had him on. He certainly gave strong indication that he hasn't done anything to lend gasoline to the fire of the idea of leaving. So we'll see. Like you said, there's still probably contractual terms that have to be worked out. Is Julius Randle leaving?
That, I think, is a little more unclear. Now, Connolly did say today that he wants to have all three of Randle, Naz Reid, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker back. So from the way that I understand it, in looking at their salary cap and in looking at just how they're going to maneuver over the next couple of years, it would seem unrealistic to me that all three of them do return, that 2 out of the 3 would be back. I would handicap it, Dan, as I think it's more likely that Randle and Naz Reid are back than Nickeil Alexander-Walker is back. But there are certainly different iterations that could happen. Julius Randle could just opt into the final year of his deal next year, and you leave it at that. Maybe there's a compromise kind of longer term plan for him where you get him at a little bit of a reduced salary number, but for over several years, like they did with Rudy Gobert to start this last season. Or, Dan, I'm not ruling out if a big trade becomes available to them, a Kevin Durant or somebody else, that Julius Randle couldn't be used in something like that. So I think that, trades are hard to pull off. So if I were a betting man, I'd say that Randle would return, but I think that one is much more up in the air right now.
If Randle opts in, is there anything in the collective bargaining agreement that precludes the Wolves from still including him in a trade for the upcoming season?
No, he could. That could be done. You can include him in a trade. They could also, do something where it's sort of like a sign-in trade.
Yes.
Where he signs a new longer-term deal and you move him somewhere else. So there are a couple of different avenues there for them to pursue in terms of making deals and looking at things. What I do know is that Chris Finch really likes Julius Randle as a player, even though he did not play well in the Western Conference Finals. I think that there is a lot of enthusiasm for bringing him back unless there is something clear-cut
better
that just really does improve their roster.
Was there any, acknowledgement in this presser of the way the team finished? You got yourself in the meat grinder with the head coach for going down that road after the last game, the elimination game. I've not seen all the quotes. I've seen some of them. My prediction is, as I ask this question of you, is that there was no willingness to talk about how bad it went at the finish, and that it's something internally that we kind of do have to explore and be sure that it doesn't mean anything ominous, even though we have a right to pat ourselves on the back and we got to the Final Four for the second straight year.
Yeah, I asked Tim Connolly specifically that, Dan, is just like, hey, how do you balance all that this team accomplished, which was significant to get to the Western Conference Finals for the second year in a row by, for any organization, let alone the Timberwolves, that's a big deal. And so they did have a lot of success. They were able to kind of fight through some early roster confusion, frustration, acclimating to the trade, and get back to where they were a year ago. By all stretches, that's a very successful season. But I did ask how Tim kind of balances that with how it ended, which was a 41 donut style embarrassment in Game 5. I mean, it was an awful performance. It was a very deflating performance against a very good team, but still just kind of looked like a team that was not ready for that moment. And what Tim said was, I don't think you can take one game and put too much emphasis on it. He then went on to kind of extol the virtues of what they have done this season. But then he did kind of wrap up his answer saying, quote, on the whole, we are pretty proud of the year we had. Not happy with it, not content by any stretch, but pretty happy with how guys competed and where we got. So there was certainly an acknowledgement that this could have ended much better. They could have even lost with more competitiveness and maybe even felt a little bit better about that. But I think on the whole, they feel like it was a successful season, and I agree with that. But I think that the way that it ended certainly did sour things just a little bit.
So without getting too deep into the weeds, can you give me a distinction, draw a distinction between second apron and first apron in terms of at least how much greater flexibility being back in the first apron as opposed to the second apron they were this last season for the Wolves moving forward? Do we have any way to anticipate where this team is going to be in that regard?
Yeah, so I'll try to make this as concise as I can, but basically the second apron is once you reach a certain threshold on your payroll, which I believe, I don't have in front of me, but I believe like $195 million or something like that this year. And when you go past that, not only do you pay a higher tax on, luxury tax on the money that you spend, so it's very, restrictive from a financial standpoint. The Wolves had a $91 million luxury tax bill, this season, which was, I think, the second or third highest in the league. So they're paying a lot of money, for this team. But what it also does is it puts restrictions on your ability to make roster moves and trades. And so, there is one of the big factors is you cannot send out multiple players in a trade and get one back like that. And so in the way that you are able to construct trades with individual teams, it makes it really, really difficult to pull off those kinds of trades. It also takes away the mid-level exceptions that you have to use in terms of roster building with and things of that nature. And so Tim Connelly did talk a little bit about that today in terms of saying that he believes that actually there was an unintended consequence of the new collective bargaining agreement that makes it so restrictive for teams that are in that second apron to trade with other teams that are in that second apron. But that is their way of life. So they would have to get very, very creative if they were going to make a move for a big player like a Durant or someone else. There would have to be multiple moves involved to kind of allow them to wiggle around some of the obstructions and restrictions of that second apron. If they drop down to the first apron, it's a little bit more relaxed and a little bit easier for them to operate. Not a ton, but a little bit more. And so that's why I do believe that there is going to be motivation to drop down into the first apron next season, unless there is a major, major move that they think puts them in championship contention.
So is the first apron attainable, especially if, again, Durant's name's probably coming up too much because there's about 9 teams whose fans are talking about him, but it's fairly obvious that he's going to be available. It certainly appears. Is it literally a contradiction that the Wolves are going to be stuck in second apron territory in order to give themselves a chance to acquire Kevin Durant?
I think so, Dan. I'm not, I haven't looked at all the numbers exactly yet, but I don't think it's possible for the Wolves to get Kevin Durant and be in the first apron, because it also is, I'm also under the very real assumption that if you're making that deal, you're keeping obviously Anthony Edwards, you're keeping Jaden McDaniels, you're definitely keeping one of like the Naz Reid, Rudy Gobert pairing. And so really quickly your roster becomes very, very expensive when you add Durant's $50+ million that he's making. And so it would essentially be kind of reverting to what you had with Karl Anthony Towns, a year ago. Now, you can make the logical argument that, hey, but we have a chance. The window is open. We're going to go for this championship right now. and add KD and do it that way and justify making that move. But I just don't see how they could do it while also not being in that second apron.
Is it fair to say that if Phoenix insists that Jaden McDaniels be involved in the deal, that the Durant discussions would be dead then, or is it not that simple?
I don't think that Jaden McDaniels would be available, Dan. Given his youth, given his defensive prowess, given all of the things that he showed in the playoffs in terms of becoming a real two-way player, I think that he and Ant are essentially untouchable in those talks. From what I understand, there were some talks, as I reported, at the February trade deadline about Kevin Durant. I don't think Jaden McDaniels was involved in those talks at that time, and I cannot imagine that he would be reintroduced into those talks given how much better he played down the stretch, right, and given that Durant is a year older. And so you have to factor that in as well. So I think the asking price for Phoenix would have to drop as well. From
your perspective, forget what you think the team might be thinking, but from your perspective as a ball guy, is Durant fool's gold? Do you think we're all not all, but many people are romanticizing him from what he was at his best, and that you really are messing with a serious potential move that could set you back a long time if he doesn't have enough basketball in him? What's your view of Durant at this point?
My view of Durant as a player is still incredibly, respectful of what he brings, because he still averaged, even this year, 26.5 points a game. He's shooting 57% from the field. He's just from 43% from 3. He's still an unbelievable offensive player. To me, Dan, the one thing that they would have to have real conversations about is, are they concerned at all about him being able to stay healthy?
Yeah,
because I think a healthy Durant, even at this age, he'll be 37 next season, is still an incredible offensive weapon that would be an upgrade over what they currently have around Anthony Edwards. But if you are worried that he would be missing 30, 40 games, and, given what you would have to pay, given what the moves you would have to make just to create the space to bring him here, that is the only thing that would cause me to hesitate even a little bit, because I just think he is such a special player. And when you looked at what they were missing against Oklahoma City, his ability to create his own shot, to get his own offense, and to do it reliably would be just a huge help to Anthony Edwards in terms of what they would be able to accomplish and how they could attack a defense like Oklahoma City's, which I still think, Dan, has to be the bar that you set right now, because that team is not going anywhere. No matter what happens in these finals, they are going to be the team to beat next year as well. And so you have to find ways to get over that hump. And I think Durant would get them a little bit closer, obviously depending on what all you have to give up. Yeah. But he's still a great offensive player if he is healthy. Even
at age 37, Durant clearly would be the second best player that Anthony Edwards had ever played with, correct?
No question.
Clearly.
I mean, I love Towns. I thought Julius Randle played great in the postseason. I think Jaden McDaniels eventually can be a great player alongside Ant, but Durant is an offense all unto himself. And his ability to just get any shot that he wants, as efficiently as he does. And you also have to factor in, Dan, that the reverence that Ant has for KD and that KD has for Ant. And so the possibilities of good chemistry there, because I do think the other conversation you have to have with Kevin Durant is, well, these last couple of stops, Brooklyn and Phoenix, haven't exactly been great on those fronts. And so you would have to have real honest conversations with yourself about what would the environment be like. And I do think that those two get along so well that the concerns would be less. But yes, he would be clearly, even at 37 years old, the number 2 player and the best player that Ant has played with.
Let me add Johnny Athletic joining us, brought to you by RBC Wealth Management. Don't forget, Kyle Potter will join us at 5:30 to go in a completely different direction. Let me ask you a question about the, I guess you could say the free agency market, because I keep reading stories indicating that there may not be much market for players as pricey as Naz Reid would probably be at this point, even what Julius Randle represents, that there might not be much of a market for those players, and that to that extent, maybe the Wolves would be able to steal them at remarkably good prices. Do you buy that logic at all? Is there anything to that?
I absolutely buy it, Dan. I do think that there could be some sticker shock for a lot of players, not just Naz Reid, not just Nickeil Alexander-Walker or Julius Randle, but for anybody who is expecting to enter this market this summer and get a major payday. There are very few teams that have that kind of space available. I know Detroit is one of them. Brooklyn is one of them. I believe Charlotte might have, right around $30 million, but there's not a lot of room out there for a big feeding frenzy, for bidding wars that can really bid up the price tag that we have seen in the past. And so if you are Naz Reid, if you are Julius Randle in particular, looking for, let's say, a contract $25, $30 million or more per season, that might be a little tough. Now, Naz is a younger player, and so I do think he will have suitors that are trying to get him. But for Randle at 31 years old, that might be a challenge. I think Nickeil Alexander-Walker is probably more of a mid-level guy, around $14, $15 million a year, and that's going to be easier for him to get that number. But for Naz and Julius in particular, anybody, Dan, in that $25 to $35 million window, that tier of player is getting squeezed more and more in this new collective bargaining agreement. I think there's going to be more of that this summer.
There's been some speculation too. I'm sure you've heard a lot of it about Darius Garland. If Cleveland decides that despite their obscenely good regular season, that something got exposed in the postseason, that means they gotta make a major change. Garland had a terrific year. I think he averaged almost 21 points, 47% from the floor, 40% from three. So is he attainable? Is he somebody you think the Wolves should be intrigued by? What do you think?
I would certainly be intrigued by him, Dan, if I were the Wolves. Certainly one of the issues that they have to look at is point guard over the long term, and having someone who can really create shots and also is a great passer, and Garland is both of those. He's a great young player. He certainly has some defensive issues you'd wonder about a little bit, but you put him with Ant and Rudy and Jaden, that's pretty darn good. So the question that I would have is I just don't know how available he is. Like you said, Dan, that Cleveland had an unbelievable season. And you look at, I could see maybe them making some kind of a move with their front court, with Jared Allen, Mobley, those guys, and if they're trying to get into the Giannis sweepstakes, if they're trying to do something like that to change things. But it's harder for me to envision them moving off of an all-star point guard who has scored at such a high level, and one, especially if you're getting into a conversation with the Timberwolves in terms of what you would be getting back for him that could help them improve their lot this season. I just don't know what the answer to that would be, unless, the Wolves would say, yeah, we will give you Jaden McDaniels in a deal for that. That might change the calculus from Cleveland's perspective. But from the Cavaliers standpoint, all of their messaging, and, of course they're going to say this, but is that they want to run it back, that they do want to get back in there. And I just think that parting with a player as young and dynamic as Darius Garland, that would be a heavy lift for the Wolves to get into that conversation and do it. But if they did, he'd be great here. And I think he and Ant would be really, really good in the backcourt. But I just think that's a less realistic option than even a Durant would be.
Johnny, as I recall it, wasn't Darius Garland the guy that Gerson Rosas coveted in a draft not that long ago?
That's exactly right. That draft night was Gerson Rosas' first on the job as Timberwolves president, Pobo, and the Wolves were down at 11, and they were trying to trade up to get Darius Garland. He was the guy that they really coveted. And when the Cavaliers took Isaac Okoro, it was someone else that went above. It was DeAndre Hunter. When he went at 4, the Wolves tried to trade up to 5. Cleveland would not trade up. But they traded up to 6, believing that Cleveland would not take Darius Garland because they had Donovan Mitchell. And so they're like, well, they're not going to take 2, or they had Colin Sexton at the time. Then they said, they're not going to take another young point guard. And so we'll get up to 6 and we'll be fine. And you'll get Darius Garland. Lo and behold, the Cavs did take Darius Garland to pair with Sexton. Yep. And the Wolves were kind of caught flat-footed. And so they ended up taking Jarrett Culver, and it couldn't have gone much worse. But yes, Garland was absolutely the guy that they wanted on that draft night, and it just didn't work out for him.
We talked about this before. I mean, Gerson, obviously, it ended kind of badly here for other reasons, but man, the guy did have a nose for talent, man. There's no denying it, right? It's just true.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, he drafted Anthony Edwards, number 1, and let's put that in context. At that time, it was not an obvious selection.
Definitely not.
You had LaMelo Ball and James Wiseman, and there was a lot of concern about Anthony Edwards. Yeah. And he was clear-eyed, and he made that pick. He drafted Jaden McDaniels at the end of the first round. Another terrific pick. He signed Naz Reid,
he made this
undrafted
team.
Free agent.
Yeah.
He turned into
and a head coach.
He had some. And he brought in Chris Finch. So he had some very, very big wins.
Yeah.
That was always the unfortunate thing about that situation is we've seen GMs come in here and just flail and do things that, they deserve to be fired for on the merits of their basketball decisions. And Gerson lost control of the organization and the leadership end of things. And so he very much could still be driving this boat right now, were it not for all of the other issues that he ran into in that job, and not anything to do with the decisions that he made as a basketball evaluator of talent.
Is he still with the Knicks? Isn't he like an advisor with the Knicks?
He still is?
He is with the Knicks.
Yeah.
Yep. He's there, and he's actually really involved. Like, he's not just a consultant. Like, he is involved in trade talks. He was kind of at the forefront of the Karl Anthony Towns trade talks with the Wolves too. So, like, he's very active in that front office.
That would have been a hell of a finals matchup. I mean, it would have been the Gerson finals.
That's true. You're right. Good point.
That would have been
Maybe
amazing.
next year.
He would have been around. He would have made himself visible. I can tell you that. So.
I think the draft is June 25, right? This year?
That's right.
So is it given the assumption that Phoenix is going to want draft picks or whoever, do we think that it's more likely that if there's going to be a big trade, that it's going to come before this draft, or not necessarily so?
Yes. Yeah, I would expect, Dan, for Kevin Durant to be moved, it would be prior to the draft or on draft night.
On draft night, yeah.
And look at what, in terms of what Phoenix can recoup. Now, I do not think that Phoenix wants to straight blow it up, because they still have Bradley Beal and Devin Booker. Bradley Beal is not going to be traded, and so they have to kind of find a way to try and be competitive still. This is not a tear down to the studs type of a situation, but certainly getting draft picks in a deal with the Wolves or any other team will be a priority for them. And hey, credit Tim Conley. He's got 17 and 31, which 31 is at the top of the second round. That's a coveted pick right now. And so for a guy who was kind of lampooned for trading all of their draft assets for Rudy Gobert, he has found a way to reaccumulate assets and make them at least have some things that they can put in the trade for KD or anyone else. The Wolves have something to offer here in that regard. So Tim Conley's maneuvered very well over the last year and a half to replenish some of what was given in the Gobert trade, in addition to going to the Western Conference Finals now back-to-back years.
651 guy, this is the question we'll close with. This is, I think, as much for me as you. Can you ask your fellow nerdling, jock-sniffing Johnny Sadfletic if he is still peacocking about his Wolves, asking for a Minnesota Wild fan friend?
Wait, are you guys trying to get me going here? Was that a real question?
I don't know. He texted it. I mean, I'm not sure.
I mean, because I've tried to be the bigger man through all this, Dan. I've turned down other opportunities, to put the knife in. But how could anyone on that side of the river feel at all like they're even in the same conversation right now with the Timberwolves, who have been to the Western Conference Finals 2 straight seasons, the Final Four, something that the Minnesota Wild haven't come close to forever and ever. And they have a full-fledged star. They have one of the better coaches in the league, and they have one of the best front offices in the league. They have built a thing that is sustainable going forward here, and they've had real success in the playoffs. And now you're kind of coming back saying, because they lost 4-1 back-to-back seasons after beating really good opponents on their way to the Western Conference Finals both years. Man, that is a choice, as the kids like to say.
It's just so refreshing for me to have you carry the banner, because I tried to deal with these the day after the Wolves were eliminated, and perhaps lost my mind. So it was time for somebody else to sort of pick up the fight.
I mean, they've won. They've done something. They've actually done something, which is entirely different from those. And I hate doing this, Dan. You know it. I hate it because I try to be inclusive of everyone. I try to rise above it, but every now and then, gosh darn it, what are we talking about here? This is ridiculous.
I had not heard Johnny Sadfletic before. Had you heard that one?
No, never.
I give him credit just because it's clever.
Johnny Sadfletic.
Sadfletic. It's wow. That's
whatever it takes to make him feel better about his team that has been stuck in the middle forever and ever. I hope they have a good off season and they get some real talent in there and they actually win a playoff series. That would be awesome.
You know what they say?
Really, really cool. But,
you know what they say, Johnny? Inadequacy breeds contempt. Inadequacy breeds contempt.
So do you pick up Gleeman then for the sidebars if Alec Lewis has to cover the Wild run with Russo? I guess you got Russo and Joe Smith. They already have a backup.
Too many people.
That's what you should be mad about,
they're
actually.
More than well stocked over there on that side of the pond because there's great fan support for that organization, which is really nice. We're happy for them that everyone gets real riled up about it, but it's the same story every year.
I hope you don't make Bill Guerin mad.
He doesn't concern himself with Johnny Sadfletic
at all about what I have to say. He may care about what Russo has to say, but
you're probably right.
I don't think he's worried about Johnny Athletic, that's for sure.
Next time we talk, maybe we'll just be talking NBA playoffs. We'll see, but there's always Wolves news to get to, so we'll stay in touch as always. Thanks, Johnny.
All right, thanks, Dan.
Appreciate you. John Athletic helping us out, brought to you by RBC Wealth Management. Sorry for that. I didn't hit the hold button quite soon enough, so you got a cough that you probably didn't necessarily look forward to. Don't forget, Thrifty Traveler guy, Kyle Potter, making national, perhaps one could say even international news with a scoop he had last week and some significant ramifications by the entire airline industry as a result of it. He is scheduled for 5:30 this evening. Lots of text to get to. Some of them revisiting subjects we covered early in this show. I've been trying to save some of them. One of them absolutely is capable of winning, I think absolutely winning, the Commons Preposterous Statement Tournament in 2025. But top 5 and 5 will include?
We'll do Twins, Lynx, and what does Donald Trump's big, beautiful bill have to do with the Wolves and Twins sales?
Thanks, Pat Kessler.